I'm so excited.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Happy Sunday. Happy Labor Day weekend. I am so excited to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and happy Sunday, happy Labor Day to everyone. I hope everyone slept in last night. Brittany and I were talking about that earlier.
I did. I told them that you emailed to ask where the link was. You were awesome. And I was like, yeah, I slept in.
Yes.
Much needed.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we have a lot of questions for you today.
Hopefully I have answers.
One of the big ones is this is very different from you.
Yes. I mean, I've always written like different kinds of things. And then writing Joe was the longest, now that I think about it, that I've ever stayed in one place. You know, like I was always like, I would get a new job or I would do something else. And I was dying to do something just like way different and with people that were very different from Joe.
What was your inspiration for Providence?
I feel like that's a book about loneliness and almost like something the other side of loneliness. I feel like Joe was always like the dark side of his loneliness and the way it can be dangerous. And this book was like, okay, but for some people, it makes them almost, vulnerable. Like in that way, when John is kidnapped, how his being alone and no one looking out for him makes him vulnerable. And then what Chloe's like feeling alone without him does. So it's just, I would say the other side of loneliness, of bringing out kindness, the way that, like they say, when bad things happen to people, some people stay in the dark and other people are like, I'm so grateful for that. It changed my life.
Jesse, do you want to ask your one? I loved it.
Oh, I have a couple.
Yeah.
I have a couple. All right. We'll start with, okay, so book reviewers seem to love to mash together literary or media inspirations for books. Like one reviewer called Providence, Dexter meets H.P. Lovecraft. And certainly there's a Frankenstein element to this book, but what would your kitschy book reviewer literary or media mashup be for Providence?
Oh, I love that. Well, for sure, Frankenstein. I mean, that was one of those books, and the Lovecraft, like I took this class in college that was like the history of horror. And I feel like I was in Providence reading about Lovecraft, and I definitely drew on all of that. And I love like the history of horror in that way of like what scares us at the time, and the way some things are new scary, like the internet, but other things are just like to be human is to be afraid. But what's funny is that my working title for this book was Terrible Things. And then I found out about this little show coming along, Stranger Things. And I was like, okay, like the timing, this happens. Like it happened with Hidden Bodies too, where my working title was Love. And then there was a show called Love. So yeah, and the terrible things of it, like I feel like the part of me that grew up on Poltergeist, the 80s horror stories, those movies that like made you afraid of the TV, and yeah, I would say Poltergeist and Lovecraft for sure, but yeah, and Frankenstein. And I'll stop because I could just keep going on.
Yeah. Did you go to a Lovecraft convention as part of your research? And if so, did you pretend to be an older midlife cop while you were there?
I did. I got the suit and the mask and everything. No, and that's one of those things. Like I remember writing the convention in U, and I had never been to that, and I read about it. It's one of those magic of the internet things. And I always knew about the Lovecraft convention, but I just read about people going to it and read about it. So yeah, I feel like my list of things that I want to do now that I've written about them is getting longer, but not including kidnapping someone. So
that's good. That's probably a good thing.
But I went to Comic-Con after I wrote this book, and that was like my first like real convention feeling. And then I've been to Colleen Hoover's, which is the same vibe. Like I love that atmosphere when all people are together loving the same thing. And again, I feel like that's such a great like answer to loneliness, when you can be with people who love what you love. Like
nice. What has it been like to write a book completely different from your other books? Providence was described as strange on its Wikipedia page. Do you feel maybe like Mary Shelley felt when Frankenstein was published?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I get it. Like it's like if you meet someone once and that's who you think of them as being. And I feel like there were 2 Joe books, so I get it, where it was like, what? And I remember in the beginning, like people being like so confused, like this is nothing like that. And I'm like, well, it kind of is. Like you're in all these different heads. Like that's always been for me writing, is like getting in someone's head. So for me, like, it was just those characters spoke in their way and had their goals and their way of dealing with the world. But yeah, I feel like in some ways it should have been called This Is Not You. Just to like give people, like, orient them to like, you're going to a different kind of world. And yeah. And then after that, having gone back, like I just finished my 4th U book. And yeah, now like the next thing I'm doing is not as different as Providence, but it's not you either. So yeah. I
So
feel
you
like,
are working on something completely different from the U series. That's what I was going to ask. If you plan to venture out, since you has taken off, and I know people are hungry. I personally am hungry to see where Joe takes us. Because as I told you, that really helped me identify that I do have horrible taste in men because I'm super into Joe.
yeah, I understand.
Jesse, why don't you tell her what you do for a living? So that she can understand why maybe my driving in hot, we were talking about, to all the red flags of Joe might not be the best thing.
All right. So I have a super heavy, kind of a bummer of a job, but I love it. I work with survivors of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. I do jail and prison outreach primarily.
Wow.
That's what I do.
So thank you for that. That's what a wonderful thing to do. Like, yeah.
She always talks me off my red flag ledge when I'm like, so I met somebody, and actually all of these wonderful women do, which is great because
part of what we do is we go into schools, and that's not my favorite part of the job. We have an awesome youth advocate that's much better at it, but I have to do it sometimes, where we talk to kids about like boundaries and red flags and things. And so I use that curriculum sometimes when I talk to Brittany about relationships.
particularly when I'm fawning over
for kids. I feel like I'm that last generation, not the last, but like that grew up like with boundaries, where like it or not, like when you got home from school, you couldn't talk to anyone unless you picked up the phone and tried to call them. You know what I mean? Like, where everything had to be more active. And I have like, I think of kids that are born into this, and it just fascinates me. And yeah, like I want to hear everything about what you do all day. Yes.
I love talking about it. So anytime.
Because boundaries, there are no natural anymore, or like the fact that they have choice, and that anyone can reach out to anyone, and they might be them and they might not be them.
Oh yeah. It's trippy sometimes when I go in and I'm talking to like 14, 15-year-olds about like boundaries, about how choice and consent can get real fuzzy under certain circumstances. And they're just like, what? Huh? And I'm like, yeah, you guys should already know this. But
sometimes she blows my mind too. Fun fact, she'll talk to me about it. Like, well, book club will drop, and she'll be like, so let's talk about that, Brittany. And I'm like, oh, do we have to?
Yes, because it's another one of those human nature things that, like, just because you know something is bad for you doesn't mean you don't want it. Like last night, I know I should have had like a healthy salad, and I was like, I want a pizza. Like, and it's like, I know that's not good for me, but like, it's, and I feel like, so that's the constant thing that people have to deal with. If like, you're going to want things, like you're going to see red flags and be like, that red flag looks delicious. Like,
to waving me in, as I like to say. I'm like, I'm coming in, even though I know I shouldn't. Like, I watch Joe and I'm like, and maybe it's just like how you wrote him and how he's portrayed on Netflix. Cause I'm like, that's kind of my kind of guy.
Yeah, no, and that I go through that. I feel like with all of this, where even now, like we're talking about the title of the book and like the description of the book, and I keep having to like, I get so immersed in his perspective that I have to remind myself that like, oh, right, like he does kill people. Like this is
it's easy to forget and overlook for a hot minute.
Not the underprivileged kid gets what he deserves. Like it's not,
I'm like, he's just really into these people. I'm like, and look, he's just like clearing the path for them to have their way. And I'm like, that's not healthy, Brittany. That's not okay.
Yes. But then in little ways, like we do those things. Like, I don't know, like I'm also like those different kinds of crimes.
Yeah.
Like why, so, I had someone say to me once that like robbing a bank, that hurting a child wasn't as bad as like robbing a bank. And I was like, let me in your head for like 10 minutes. How do you even kind of get there? Like,
wow.
That was one of the things too with Providence, that like, it was like, when the vulnerability of being a child anyway, it's that feeling that like, oh, you're still growing. Like when you're an adult, like it's like things worked out. And that's why I wanted eggs to be in there. Cause like what about your job? Like, I'm like, I like those points in life where everything's ahead of you. And that point where it more feels like, oh, everything's behind me. I think it was my book of looking at 40.
Okay.
Like of starting to think of like, oh, like all the things I'm going to do versus all the things I did. And I feel like we all go through that. And I liked the idea of having these different people in very specific coming of age moments, when, yeah.
So what? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, what happens to John in the basement? Like, we never really get the full picture of like his powers and everything else. Like, there's
Yeah.
reference back, but like, what is done to him outside of being kept in a coma?
I felt and went into so many rabbit holes and wrote so many pages about that, about like weird experiments. Like I just love like in some basement in Romania, they're trying to like make a person be capable of photosynthesis and like seeing, and the way that with all like with science and like a lot of information now, the way like, oh, if you're reading this, like you get to that 3 a.m. moment where you start to believe it. So I written all of it, and I was going to have Magnus's perspective in the book. So I had him explaining what he's doing and why he's doing it. And it was kind of like his loneliness of wanting the fantasy of not needing anyone, like to be that then you wouldn't ever experience feeling alone or need because you had everything, you were like self-sufficient. And how that like the irony of how we're all supposed to be that way, but then that's also what makes people sociopaths. Like the confusion of like what it means to be independent and take care of yourself means that you don't need other people, which means you can kill them or torture them and look at it that way. But yeah, the science of it, like I can send you things if you want, but it was this main like Romanian guy who was he had veins of trees, and he was kind of had an IV and was trying to like make a hybrid human tree. And according to him, he was getting there. And I feel like it goes back to too, like everything, like every idea sounds crazy when you hear it, but then so many things do wind up becoming possible. So letting myself kind of imagine, like, what if the crazy guy in the basement doing his weird science is like actually onto something?
Yeah, I would love to read that. I think we all would be fascinated by that.
Yeah. And then I think too, that like part of the heart stuff was like, I liked the idea of it. I feel like it was taking like in you books for me with Joe, it's like his heartache becomes your problem. And I liked the idea of saddling John with that problem, but him actually seeing it as a problem of like knowing that his feelings can lead to like affect other people's lives, how some people don't even think about this. Like, I feel like Joe, like there's no one but Joe, but
Yeah.
John, I liked the idea of someone, like, how would you go through the world if what you felt about someone, you didn't get, like, it didn't matter if you acted on it, that your body had like actions to affect someone else's body. And also like there was this book that a therapist gave me years ago about toxic vampires that I feel like I always draw on in everything I write, about when you're around some people. The book is called Psychic Vampires. I think I can look it up, but how there are those people that you're around and in the moment you feel really good. And then like an hour later, you get dizzy and feel sick. And I feel like you see this more people talking about it now, but that's always fascinated me with like, what is it about some people that the moment you're with them, like the way we change when we're around some people, and then you start to realize, oh, you have different ways of being, but the way some people afterwards, you still carry that with you, and other people make you crash. And I liked just blowing it up to another level, because I feel like that's like, it's another way in which like Joe likes that about himself, and yeah, the way it can be a good thing or a bad thing.
If John were to meet Joe, what do you think they would think of one another?
I mean, I feel like Joe would feel superior because he doesn't have a gift like that, like he would feel like he does that without the gift, and when no one had to do anything to Joe to make him be that way, like what he feels does affect other people. And John, I feel like would probably like find a reason to make it a way that like he's lucky. Like John, I feel like is a positive thinker who's trying to like find a way out of this mess. And he would feel good, like, well, at least I've never done anything to anyone on purpose.
Do you see if the story continued that John ever finds a way to like overcome or control his power? And then
I debated the end a lot, but for me, part of it, like it kind of ties back into not going there into the basement and not seeing Magnus's side of it. I felt like so much of the book was about the difference between what you can know for a fact, like what you can do in the real world, and what you can know in your heart. So for me, it ended with him knowing that like he had Chloe with him, and how like that was part of it, that like that was one thing he didn't have to wonder about anymore. Like that was the journey to like, okay, like you can't control the circumstances, but if you have someone on your side and you know that like you have that, like you can cope with it. but I would hope that they would figure it out. I like that idea. But at the same time, like it's where the eggs part of the story was like, yeah, he's like learning to accept like that he can't fix this. And that sometimes you have to like stop trying to fix something and just be with it, you know?
I liked that aspect of it. I
Mhm.
think the fact that, yeah, the eggs kind of perspective through all of it and him going through things like his cancer and his colostomy bag, and you know what I'm saying? I'm like,
Yeah.
I liked his perspective and what he brought to the story a lot.
Yeah. And for me, it's the way like everyone at every age is always coming of age or coming to terms with some part of themselves or their life. Like it's like the moment you're like, okay, like I could get another perm, but it's gonna fall out. I have straight hair. Like it is, you know, like, but then yeah, like deciding what to do about yourself. So I liked ending it on that note. Yeah, that like
And I think he finally kind of came to terms with like what he was going through and who he was, it felt like, and then he reconnected with Chucky. So I liked that aspect that he finally goes and reconnects there.
yes, yes.
That made my heart happy.
Me
I'm like,
too.
so I work with special needs children. That's not my
Oh no,
day job, but I'm
everybody.
like, so I'm like, we had a lot of connections to the book. So I'm a designer and an art director for government clients, but I also work with special needs children and do art therapy on the side. So that's like my heart and my passion. So that Chucky had autism and things like that. I think I felt connected to their family and their situation based on knowing parents, of special needs children and how
Yeah.
much that can be, work wise and things like that. So
Oh, yes. And then like I feel like when someone can't tell you what they're going through, like I only very briefly when I was in college volunteered at the at a hospital that was for children with problems. And I can't like you do this all the time. I mean, this was years ago, but that stayed with me of like the main thing for me was imagine not being able to say what you want.
well, and that's why art therapy is so great. Sometimes it's not even like what they're drawing, it's the color that they're using or how hard that they're pressing. And you're like, okay, so that black crayon and how hard you're pressing it means you might not be as happy right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's you're drawing like a black rainbow. Okie
Yeah.
dokie, like maybe we stop this activity. Like this is not working. So I really I think that aspect of having that in the book.
Yes. Oh, your jobs. I want to hear more about what you
And we want to hear more about Joe.
Yeah.
I do. I need to know more. I'm like, I can't wait for the next book. So can you tell
Yeah.
us anything about the book that you're working on that is not you related?
Oh yeah, I mean it's well there's it started with a short story and actually no, first yeah, I'm getting the order of events moved. I'm working on a few different things for the past few months and that's where I've been kind of super in my own head and offline and like because I'm like I feel like schizophrenic from all the all the things. But I have a book about a woman who is a children's book writer and she has no children and her books are like the big thing like the cartoons, the movies and all of that is set, but then at a baby shower, her best friend doesn't make her the godmother the way she did for her first child. And so begins Her Name is Pearl. Pearl's, decision to find herself a man. And she's part of it. Like she's been writing these very sweet, like women power stories for young girls. And it's kind of like she applies her own lessons from her books to her life. And yes,
Oh, that sounds good.
yes.
When's that one due out?
I'm not, this is where it's always hard to tell. I feel like so U4 is coming April 4th, 2023, finally. So I imagine this one, I think early 2025, like similar timeline, but I feel like we don't never get to decide these things or, yeah.
Yeah, I was
Like,
gonna say, as we talk to authors, we're learning that like how little control you guys have over when things actually come out and how they move through all of the processes.
yes. Yeah. Like I feel like it's my friend said it well, like once the book is done, like the book is their product and it's like your baby, is not your baby.
Yeah.
Because I think we would all like put it out there right away. I'm like, oh, if I could hit publish on U4 today, like I would do that.
Oh, I would be there. I would like have it immediately. Yeah. Those have been my favorite.
And in that one, he goes to Harvard in this next book, in the next U book. He gets a writing fellowship. He kind of thought about how everything went so terribly for him with women. So he wrote a novel and did some Jewish things to get a fellowship. And wouldn't you know, like there's a girl in that room, like he's kind of decided that like, oh, he'll be a writer and that's good enough. And that's like, he's done with women in love. But Harvard plays matchmaker. So, and makes some bad decisions.
I was gonna say, I love that we can call it Joe-ish things, and we all know what that means. Probably not the best decisions.
Yes, that is a very surreal thing to me. Like a few weeks ago, I was on the beach and with a friend's daughter, and the people in front of us were talking about Joe Goldberg, and this kid is like, "Can I tell them? Can I tell them?" I'm like, "Just give me a minute. Like, it'll never not be weird." You know, when someone starts out as your imaginary friend and like writing this crazy book and giggling with your friends and family, and then over years, like hearing someone else say his name. Yeah.
It kind of has become a household name in a way.
Yes. In some households.
My household.
Oh,
Guilty.
yeah, we watch it. It was one of the things we watch. He's really into it. He'll only like admit that to me, but yeah.
Yeah, no, people are funny about that. Yes. Like how we identify with what we watch and look at. Oh yeah, like Providence, like I was like, there's something else like that it came from. The show The Middle that's referenced in the book.
Mhm.
Like I
yeah.
years loved that. And I remember when I was like starting the publication process and they're asking you things like your favorite TV shows. And I'm like, The Middle, they're like, who would ever think that? Like you write this violent. I'm like, why do you think I need things like The Middle? Like the primary colors and like even the music, like and I've always liked those extremes, and then putting them together, like things that are very sweet and then things that are very dark, and the dark with the sweet within the dark. And yeah.
So the eyes, why were the eyes what you chose to paint? Or that was being painted?
Yeah, I think it has to do with when someone you're used to seeing and not take for granted, but you're just used to like things that you don't realize how much you need them. And one of those things that I feel like this was also weirdly like, I didn't feel the pandemic coming, but it all felt like, oh, I've seen people spell these things out since we all went through that. Like when you make eye contact and it lowers your blood pressure and you just like, you think of that as just part of someone that you're used to having. I liked the idea of her not knowing that until it was gone, that like what she missed most was like being able to look over and make eye contact with John, and the way that can kind of like bring you back to yourself and it makes everything feel okay. And I think that when he goes away, and it's a little selfish too, of like one, like that's what I feel like eye contact is the two-way street of it. And it's like the opposite of Joe, who's like watching people and it's about his eyes, but like healthy people, it's the exchange. And I feel like that's what she's coming to terms with. And that just felt like the most natural thing, that she would miss the way he looks at her, because she sees other people looking at her in ways that make her uncomfortable or make her aware that like, she's not a perfect person, like who is, but whenever John looks at her, it settles. So what happens when the person whose look tells you that everything is okay is gone? Like you try to replicate it or like find a substitute for it. And it's, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that I feel like I like those, like it's the classic story of like when you think someone's dead and they come back to life. And yeah, I like those back from the dead, like zombies without the zombie of it, you know.
I like that it was like just supernatural enough. I think like it didn't feel too supernaturally.
Yeah,
But
well, that's also one of those things. Like I just like, it's a personal thing. I just don't like Marvel movies. And
I don't either.
like, I think for years, my nephew's like so obsessed with them, and I get it. Like, and I see the love, like, it's not in that way of like, oh, they're not good. Like, I get why people love them, but definitely when you go to write something, for me, it's like, you're like, almost like you have to challenge yourself. Like, I was like, well, what is it? Why do I get my backup when there are like superpowers? And I grew up with my dad always watching Lord of the Rings and reading those books and loving those things, and me being like, I like the real world. I like the real world. So you kind of want to figure out like, well, why, what would happen if I, ate the vegetable that I don't want to eat, But it's like, I feel like it was also like coming from the U books and wanting some element, like some new thing to play with, the way that there is nothing supernatural in that sense about the U books. Yeah.
What was it like for you when you took off?
It was so surreal. And the way it was a very like slow process, like when it went to light, like it was all, I always like think you celebrate every little moment. You know what I mean? Like you never know, like if the option is going to result in a script, if it's going to go forward. So the whole time you're just like yay, it's happening. And the Lifetime, like, it was great, and it aired, and they had banners in the sky, and it was on buses and posters, and it was so exciting. And then every week, like, less people were watching it than the week before, but it was like anything, like, it doesn't take away from how much the experience was so great and how much people love the show that did find it. So you kind of like be like, okay, like, that was it, and that was great, and yay. And then it goes on Netflix, but a lot of things go on Netflix, you know what I mean? Like, there's no. And then I remember I was in Vegas, and it was kind of like, I would compare it to the moment that I found out that Stephen King had tweeted about reading you, when my cousin was like, oh my God, like, this is everywhere. And it was a very strange, it was like, oh, like I had kissed it, not goodbye, but you know what I mean? Like, you just don't expect things to get bigger when you're so grateful for the size that they are. So that was crazy. And then memes and all that, it was, yeah, like, just wild.
The memes are the best. Are you still working with Netflix? Because I know the storylines have like taken, I've seen you in another interview basically where you've talked about, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you read the book and then you still watch the series, which obviously I do both because I'm obsessed with both, but they're different and they've kind of gone in different courses. So how much are you involved in all of that still?
Yeah, I took a step back. I mean, I wrote an episode in season 1, and basically when they were going to do another season, I was going to write an episode, but I got to write 2 more books. And I was like, I feel like maybe if I was better at life, I could be in 2 places at once. But I was like, already when you're the author in the room, you feel like everyone can't fully let them. I'm like, every writer needs that freedom, and everyone was great, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you're the one, like, it's your baby. And yeah. I took a step back because they, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do in their story and what works for them on screen. And I'm like, I'm going to go write my books. And yeah. And like, I feel like it's all worked out. It seems to have all worked out well. Oh, hello, kitty cat.
Sorry, that's Felix.
Yes. Hi, Felix. No, that's great. I feel like that's what's fun about this. Things that couldn't happen if we were all sitting in the same room, you know?
Yep.
Aw.
Felix.
Oh, that's one thing that I remember, like, and when Providence with the dog, like, it's one of those things in writing. I thought, well, it
Oh,
always
that made me so sad.
Oh,
You
yeah,
killed
that
a
was
dog,
sad.
Caroline. But
Is
we
this
didn't
always
talk
about
about
me?
when you
It's
did that,
kind of-
I was so sad inside.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love like people will get like, it's kind of like that came out of like watching people get kind of protective of Joe and mad about some things, but not mad about the murder. And it's me like, yes, I feel like you can judge a moral compass by how a society treats animals and all that. But for me with John, it was like, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? It's killing a dog, right? Like, to me, it's like, just, you know, it's when you're crying, or you learn that when you're a kid, when you have a pet, when your friend loses their dog, like, it's just terrible. But I feel like I heard from people who are very mad at like, warning, like, dog dies. And I'm thinking, he kills all these people. Like,
we're worried about the dog. We were all just talking about, like, I have
Yeah.
a dog and she's 10 years old. And literally that was one of the things that we were talking about before you joined us, is I'm like, I tell her every day she's not allowed to pass away. Like, Bailey and I were talking earlier, like, we just have to go at the same time our animals do. And it's fine. If we have short lives, that's okay. Like, we've made peace with it. You know what I'm saying? But I'm like, yeah. You
We were
Right. So
also
I'm
talking about
how you
how
all
it's
feel about
harder.
that. What's that?
Sorry. No, we were talking about how it's harder when a dog dies than a human dies.
Yes.
So that was like the roughest part of the book. Like, I mean, all the people, it's fine, but the dog.
Yes. And it fascinates me because, like, I mean, I agree. Like, I feel like there's not, like, I've seen them, like, Marley and Me, like 10,000 times. It's one of those, when I want to cry, like, I will cry. I could not watch that without crying at the end, you know, like.
Mine is The Art of Racing in the Rain. Have you
Mine
read
too.
it and seen
Yeah.
the movie?
Yeah.
Like, if I need to cry fest, I will reread that book
Yep.
and I will sob my way through the entire thing, just knowing.
I feel
getting
like that one's more
perspective.
manageable, but Marley and Me is like ripping my heart out. Like, The Art of Racing in the Rain, like, at least the dog is, you know, reincarnated as a human, which I like.
Right.
Yeah, Enzo comes
it's
back.
like
I
the
do
dog.
like that. Yeah.
Is it A Dog's Journey? Is that the movie?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that one I love too. A Dog's Purpose.
Yeah, but I feel like dog people have very different reactions to that. Like I love it because I love the idea that like, oh, the spirit moves on in the way,
Yeah.
oh, now I'm a corgi and I have these short little legs, or now I'm a girl. I feel like it's a beautiful
I
mess.
love that.
But so many dog people that I know are like, don't, no, like don't talk about death. But I'm like, it's the point that like the dog's happy, like the
Yeah,
dog
yeah.
gets to go experience the world all over again and is always born fresh. And yeah, I mean, do you think we could ever think that about people?
Nah.
Not as
Oh,
easily.
no. I hate to say it, but no.
Yeah.
That might be another one of those red flag things that I get lectured on later.
Right.
Where Jesse's like, let's unpack that, Brady. And I'll be like, well, what happened was.
Yes.
I love that the dog's name was Cody Kardashian, by the way.
That was cute.
Oh yes, the dog names are fun. Yes, I don't know. I feel like that's one of the reasons for having animals in a book, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where I was really sad when Crane, Flory died. And I'm like, yeah, and I like, it's like, that, nothing is sadder than a dog, but it was just an interesting experience to see it, like the experiment in life proved that exactly true.
Yep.
So do you base your characters on anybody in real life? Like, is Joe based on someone, or like, how do you develop? You say that they're kind of in your head and they come to life, but how does that work for you?
It's a real voice person. Like I remember like even the day like John's voice came first, I almost had a car accident. And it was like, when you just are shaking and you're in that like, oh, I'm alive. And I feel like I suddenly heard him just talking in this meek way where like you're suddenly like thrust back into, oh, right, being alive is a gift. And yeah, it goes with voice. I'm more not so much on people, but on the way that people have made me feel. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like for Joe, I'm like, it's this similar thing of the red flag. Like, why do guys like that know just what to say? Like, not that I've known anyone who's a murderer like that, I'm like, not to that extreme, but the way sometimes it feels like we're built, like sometimes the people who are least interested in the well-being of others are the best at making you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but yeah, I've gotten a lot of letters from people saying like, oh, is he, I won't tell anyone, is he real? Like, I just want to meet him. And I'm like,
You're like, no, thank goodness.
No.
You should be happy this man's not real. Did you know how this was going to end? I know you said that you kind of, or at what point did you know how this book Providence was going to end?
Yeah, I mean, I debated, I feel like I knew how it was going to end, but I did debate a lot about like the why of the ending. Like, why didn't I want him completely cured, and then that was kind of what got me my question when I was writing. It was kind of like what I went through with you, where I knew Beck would die, and it's like you write the book for me to answer that why. Like, why does this person have to end up dead, and why does he have to not have like get cured? Like, why can't love fix everything? And I guess that's a little dark, but it's like, well, it can't.
But I think I was hoping love was going to fix everything for him, or that realization, like even when he meets, was it Flora, and their whole relationship or whatever, and he kisses her and like nothing bad seems to happen, but the cat dies. You kill off a few animals in
I
this
know,
book.
I know.
I'm like, now that we're unpacking it, I'm like, you kind of killed a few animals in this book.
Yeah, and that is part of I'm like, to accidentally kill like whether you run over a dog, like I don't know, to even be near an animal that dies, I feel like it's horrible. And I feel like a lot of it is like the masochism of writing. I'm like, oh, what could be,
Well,
what's
the
worse?
fish too, right? I was
Yeah,
gonna
he
say
did.
like there was a few animals in here that
It's okay. It wasn't too detailed. There wasn't any suffering. So
yeah, we didn't harp
it
on
was
it,
Right.
which was
manageable.
good.
Right. Yes. And I do feel bad for fish. I feel like, because they're like the butt of so many death jokes, or like, oh, the goldfish dies and you flush it down the toilet and like, haha. Like, but the fish was alive. He had his little fish life. Like,
Mhm. What do you think happened to Pedro the hamster?
oh, I feel like
Oh,
he went
yeah.
off into the woods, and I feel like if I could go back, I might tell his story and part of
Yeah.
it, because
Like
I like the idea that like, it's like that the child in me is like, oh, to be captive and then run out into the world. Like so many good kids books are like those
I
animals.
was gonna say, like that could be a kid's book right there. Like
Yeah, or novella.
he's got
Yes.
his little like red spot from the blood on his little fur, and he gets to be spooky and
That'd be a
keep
good
going.
short story if you ever wanted to write about, yeah.
I
Yeah.
might do that. Yes. And how like they would, and how those two lives would compare. Like when you thought about like, oh, someone always giving you food and now you have to go and find it and
Mhm.
didn't have any enemies. And, but then also I feel like he was probably tired of being like clung and, you know,
Yeah.
like it would be a
Yeah.
real freedom for him.
Held in the pocket, and yeah,
Yeah.
like that was a
He's probably
different
like,
kind of captive.
yeah, being a
Yes.
school pet, it's gotta be hard.
Yes. And I think too, like that's where like the pets, like in that way, I outline, but it's like the way it surprises you, then you think you're doing one thing. And then I did find animals kept coming up because I'm like, well, what do you know? We do this to animals. We keep them in cages and like experiment, like tell them to love us, you know, like
Yep.
make them totally dependent on us. And then we call that love when it's like, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Do they really choose to love us, or is that all they know?
Yeah, like growing up, we had this cat Cookie, and my dad, and she's just like a very nasty little creature, like a real cat's cat, nothing like yours. Like she wouldn't come up and be held and hugged. But my brother really, you know, you love your pet. And my dad kept saying, if someone broke in here and killed all of us, and all of our bodies were on the floor with cans of cat food, she would eat that cat food and then she would eat us. Like that's nature. Like,
And I'm all right with that. I'm kind of like, it's fine.
yeah, yeah.
What he does when
I
I'm
feel like
gone.
there's an honesty with cats.
Yeah.
Like, you know, dog would be sad at first. Like, oh yeah, one of the other inspirations, Gerald's Game, the Stephen King
Ooh, yeah.
dog. Like that was just one of my favorite things ever written, like in the history of the universe. One of those, like, why do I bother doing it? Like that book has that like otherworldly, like, oh my God, like that dog every time he goes into that house. And I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah. Oh, I know where I was going. That like dogs, we think of, I feel like, as being closer to humans. That like they're going to go through emotions, and you know, there's a little more depth to the connection. But eventually, the dog is going to eat you if it needs to. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you, Jesse. If it needs to happen, if that's how it happens, I guess I
Yeah.
give Annabelle permission.
Yeah, I'm what
I'd
what do
like
I
to
do
think
at that
she'd be
point?
sad and join me too, you know, just give up
Right.
at that point. But I mean, she is an animal at the end of the day, so
Yes.
maybe not.
Well, yeah, with these cats, I know the score. It's fine.
You made peace with it.
Yeah. I mean, already, like the whole reason why he was even coming over here is he wants treats, and he's like, I pay to play. I'm gonna be nice to you. You'll be nice to me."
Yeah, and I love the way they've adapted to that. Like, what I just read something like that dogs learn to do that because it gets them treats. That like I feel like there's nothing cuter than when a dog. Have you seen that video where they have the security camera and it pans around and the dog is sitting there looking at the camera and it's so cute doing the head tilt, and it's like right because they know it's been like they're genetically now programmed to like they know what we think is fucking cute, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And they use it, they milk it. They're like, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Like,
teaching
we all do.
Annabelle, how to crawl. And so my mom's like, I think she's just doing that because you like reward her and you get so happy at the end. Like
Yeah.
every time, and she crawls to me. Like she's not crawling away from me. She's smart enough to crawl to me. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, I'm so proud of you. You know, like and cooing at her with a treat and everything else. And mom's like, she always crawls to you. And I
Yes.
was like, yeah, she knows. She's
Yeah.
got me played.
Yeah.
She's figured it out.
They're little sociopathic hustlers. It's fine.
Yeah, which is like what people have to be to some, you know.
Yeah.
degree. Yeah, and I think that I feel like that's part of where, to me, Joe is someone who embraces that and like leans into that. And I liked kind of cornering someone who doesn't think that way about the world at all, and will eat, like John to me is someone who will eat shit sandwiches all day. And I like the idea that if you don't take control, eventually something takes control of you. That was part of where also I didn't want to give him like the happy ending, because not like the solution, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's not that easy to escape your nature, and that maybe it's the beginning of his escape, but the same way, like, I don't know, like when I'll be asked if Joe is redemption for Joe, I'm like, no, because he doesn't want it, you know. And
I was gonna say, is he even capable at this point? Like he's
Yeah.
in so deep, basically.
He
Yes.
said he doesn't want it. He's like, I don't need this.
yes,
It's gotten him everywhere he wants to go, like you said, now to Harvard, basically. So
He's
Yeah.
justified in his mind. He's like, I'm not the problem.
yes. And I feel like if you're good at mental gymnastics, like things and that's where I feel like in this book, it's like in every book that I write, I feel like it boils down to like with mastering mental gymnastics, and it's the way that we talk to ourselves and all of that, and how we think of what we're going through, and like the way that's what starts everything with how you approach the world.
I like that inner dialogue, getting that perspective of like being inside a character's head. Sometimes it makes me feel a little bit better in my own head. I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm like, Caroline wrote it, so I'm not the only
I
one
don't
who,
feel
like,
like that's for reading and
does
writing are
that.
so
Yeah.
comforting, like necessary. Yes.
Not the only one.
Yeah, and I liked like the idea that like these problems don't go away, or like that nothing fixes them. The same way like I feel like with Eggs and Low, like it's not a love issue, and that sometimes love can be an enabling thing that like kind of allows people to not deal with themselves, like they have that closeness that John and Chloe can't have, but they have their problems. Like,
But yeah, it wasn't a perfect relationship there either. Obviously, yeah, like with the wedding
Right.
shower.
Yes.
And he didn't get the gift, and
Yes.
didn't get the card, but shows up with 2 bouquets of flowers, and she's like, why?
Yeah, because I feel like it's like a thing that like it's another fantasy that like if I just had that person, then like the idea that fulfillment is in another person, and that togetherness means, I wanted to I liked these 2 stories about, well, these 2 people can't be together. These people are stuck together and none of it works. Such a happy story. But yeah, I feel like it's again, like going like, I mean, yeah, I guess I had a meeting once and they said that their company had a joy mandate. And I'm curious what you guys think of this, like with all the books you read, where they were like like what we define as uplifting and what we think of as a happy ending, like in that way, in my fucked up brain, I thought of you as a very happy ending, in the sense that like it for the world of that book and that character, of like another girl's coming in, it's hope, in the sadness, there is hope. And the same way I think of Providence is happy because there is some resolution. But yeah, that like the joy mandate, like when you read a book, do you go in like do you like to feel like, okay, there's something good is gonna, do you have an idea of how you want it to end, or what, like as you get into it?
I think it depends on the type of book.
Yeah.
And who the author is, and if we've like read something by them and we have like an expectation sometimes for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Same.
I think when I read Providence, I expected John to die at the end. That's what I was like thinking, okay, he's gonna like kill himself for
Yes.
someone
I think
else.
I thought that's where it was going myself towards the end. I don't think I came in expecting that, but I thought towards the end, like it sounded like he was saying goodbye to everybody when he wrote the letter to
Right.
his parents in the
Right.
newspaper, and he circled it in the box and he
Mhm.
watches his parents get it. And then it almost sounded like he was saying goodbye to everybody, like ticking the boxes. I really thought, I didn't think until the end that he was going to end his life, but I thought he was finally going to be like, okay, I've done some good. I can't get rid of this. I can't be with who I want to be with. This is it for me, basically.
Yeah.
And I
Yes,
thought that whole
I feel like
scene.
he was
Yeah.
killing the dream to me of trying to fix it. And
Mhm.
that's kind of when you open up to love, or like when things get good, when you finally like kind of forgive yourself, or like stop, like, when you make amends. And it's that like, then life is one day at a time kind of thing. And that's when sometimes the universe like delivers good things.
Well, and I thought that was his way of just ending everything and basically saying goodbye.
Yes. And I'm like, I feel like it's funny you said, I'm like, I feel like I can remember thinking that thinking of that early on. Like, is he going to kill himself? Yeah.
Well, and that's what I thought. Like, I was like, well, that makes sense. He's saying goodbye to his parents. He's saying goodbye to everything that matters to him, essentially, that he was living for or hoping to get back to, I would imagine.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny what I feel like one of those writing things with character, like sometimes you make people to kill them and they feel like they're, it's like it feels part of their life is going to be their death in the story. And then others like just too attached to kill, and
Yeah, like if Joe died, I'd be really sad. I know that's really unhealthy and that's not a good thing to say, but I'd be really bummed out the day Joe dies is going to be a sad day.
Yes. Yeah, no, I always tell myself he's really young. So there's that, he's got
That's good. He's got that going for him, but he does get himself into a lot of trouble. I'm like, buddy, You need to be a little bit more careful with your bad decisions.
There is a woman in this book who very much, notices just what you said. Yes. And he does not take that well,
I- I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah, that's where I'm like, April. It's so like, for me, it's like every couple of years, I think, with a book. And it always around this time feels like chomping at the bit, like, oh, I want it to be out there. I do have a short story in a horror anthology that's out, I think, next month or October. I think October. Yes.
Do you ever do arcs with book clubs? Like we've done some in the past. We're doing one with JT right now, which we're really excited about. Her next book, One of Us.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, I could probably do that. I don't have them yet, but I will. I mean, I'm like, okay, if it's out in April, there will be arcs in like December, like there kind of have to be. So
if you do and you can and you'd consider
yeah,
us,
let's
that
keep
would
in
be
touch. Yeah, I would do
let's
that.
be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes, because that's so fun to like this kind. I feel like right, that moment before the book is out when you're dying. You know what I mean? Like
We'll help with that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, and usually what we do is because I'll design like we'll do a song, like a Spotify song list, basically of things that are like inspired or listen to while you read or something like that, and then design it around the theme of the book or the cover of the book if it's a look and feel. And then Jesse or somebody will usually do a really awesome write up, and we can
Yes.
record it and put it on the YouTube channel so that we can like build some hype for you before it's out. I'm like, obviously you just got enough hype. I was like that whole series.
No, I'll be,
but
I feel like no author's ever going to be like, yeah, I'm good.
but that's what we usually do. I was like for our arcs, so
Yeah, I would love that.
that'd be
Yeah, and
awesome.
you made me realize, right? Those are going to be like,
I was like, it's coming. I was like, I
feel
know
like
you
time
gotta.
has just been so strange, right? Like the
Since the
accordion of it, where
pandemic,
the day is
yeah.
either 8,000 hours or an hour long, and I can't. Yeah, like even because I remember I was thinking how when we set this up, Brittany, and I was thinking that's forever from now. That's
I
so
know. I'm like, and I
and
start
then I was
planning
like,
it a year
Yeah.
ahead on purpose with authors because I know you guys are starting to plan and working on your next books. I'm like, so I've learned about a year out, you know what I'm saying? At least 6 months out to be fair and to get on somebody's calendar. And then
Yeah.
just keeping in contact enough to not drive y'all crazy, but to be like, yes, we're here and we're excited and we're gonna
Right.
read it and we can't wait,
And you're smart the way it's because I don't know something about the invitation you did, like it was in my calendar.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
do
mean?
the
Like, it's
Zoom
like, oh,
invite
I
so
like
that
that.
it's
Like,
easy to already be. I'm like, I'm
and
a
it's official. It's not my stupid handwriting where everything is spelled wrong. And I'm like, maybe this was next month. Like, who knows? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I just be talking to myself. Like, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm a planner and I've learned, I'm like, this is, I think, our 3rd year now, basically, of doing
Oh,
things.
wow.
And so the first year, Samantha Downing was the first one that I asked.
Yes.
And
oh,
she said,
so good.
yes, I adore her. And so she's come back now. We did her
Did you do
second
your own
book.
good?
We did For Your Own Good
Yeah.
together. But I read the first one, My Lovely Wife, and that's how I fell in love with her. I was like, ooh, that's just like dark and twisted enough. I'm like, for my red flag mind, I'm like, so I don't need books to end happy, basically.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
back to your question, I think it just depends on what I'm going in and what I know about the author of the books
Right.
that they read.
Right. Yeah. And more, it's like, I feel like I just want to care. Like, I don't need to like the person or dislike them. I just need to care. Like, For Your Own Good is such a good example because I just loved him in that cop. Like, I loved his attention to detail and I respected that. And I like the way all qualities can be used for good or for bad,
Mhm.
and like all the systems that he was dealing with and against, like, and then I like that feeling of like, oh, that awful, like, oh, I'm thinking about the coffee pods and what he's doing is a good thing and it's a bad thing. And we know that, but like, yeah, I feel like that's the other kind of book magic. Yeah.
I need to feel invested in the characters and their story.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's what matters to me. Like we've read some books here and there where I'm just like, I didn't care about any character. You know what I'm saying? Like what happened or how it transpired. And so it was hard to get through. If I can get connected to like one of them, I'm like, okay, now I need to know what happens. Like I need to see this out. And do they live? Is it happy? Is it sad? It doesn't matter. I just
Yeah.
need to know how it plays out.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I feel like you said, it reminds me, I feel like one of the things with Providence, like I was originally just going to do John and I was like, oh no, well, like after like 2 U-books, like I do part of that, not frustration, but with writing a U-book, like it's a lovely thing, but you're so aware that it's one side of the story. And
Yes,
it's
Joe's
like,
side
yeah.
of the story, and you're in his creepy head, which
Yeah.
is fantastic. But yeah,
And I had a thought at one point even that I was going to like eliminate John's perspective and just have it be Chloe and Eggs.
that could be interesting.
Yeah. And it was one of those things, the way I feel like once the book is done, like I feel like you're not supposed to do it, but I'm like, oh, I feel like 3 was a lot for me, and
Yeah,
yeah.
because you had those 3 perspectives. I liked that though. And I think that's something like Jodi Picoult does where you jump through different characters that tells the story. And I like that you get more than one perspective.
Yes.
So I enjoyed that. And that was different from the U series, like you said. So
Right. But yeah,
It-
but now I'm very much gone back to the one. Yeah.
which isn't bad. I'm like, as long as you connect to that character, you know what I'm saying? You care about like how it plays out. And then
Yeah,
if
and I
it's
feel like I like the life experience of it, the way, like, for me, like the claustrophobia of like, no matter, where you go, you're in your head. And yeah, I like that feeling in a book. Unless I feel like when someone does it really well, it's like inspiring and amazing to have all these different voices. And yeah.
yeah, but I'm
yeah,
like, I don't mind necessarily being in somebody's head, especially if you see like those parallel thoughts where you're like, oh, I thought like that. And you're like, oh, that makes me feel a little bit better. Like sometimes I thought I was a little crazy thinking like that. But if somebody wrote it and
Yeah.
this is what the character's doing, then I feel fine.
Yes.
Like you said, it's those mental gymnastics, the things that we tell ourselves basically every day to survive.
Yes. And in the story that's out in October, it's called I Did a Thing. And it's about this hairdresser who just like loves Sweeney Todd and
Oh.
wishes to. And it's one of those things like, I'm like, oh, what is wrong with me that like now I'm bad about going to the hair salon. It's one of those things, especially during pandemic. I was like, you mean I can just not do it? Like, and now I'm like, I'll never go again and lay back and close my eyes because of this fucking story that.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yes. But yeah, I like that if you spend enough time, it's like when you get somewhere, how sometimes you walk into a room and you're like, it smells, but eventually you don't smell the smell anymore.
Mm.
That's how I think of that first person perspective. Like you don't even notice the smell. You're just like,
Yeah, it stops feeling weird or strange or unnatural. You're just like, okay, what happens next?
yes.
I
And
love
that, yeah, going like what you said about the eyes, I feel like that is to me, like a good way of putting it, of like, yeah, that like the way a person can be that person who doesn't make you notice your own smell.
Well, and I oil paint. And so that was something for me that I think it stood out. Her being an artist, I was curious about why the eyes and then the cityscape. I mean, obviously you understand the cityscape where she's painting over the eyes, and even her, person at the time's like, well, it feels like there's something else here. There's something deeper. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Because she painted over all those eyes. I'm like, so of course there's more to it than the cityscape. I'm like, there's like an eyes, a set of eyes looking out
Yeah.
through you. You don't realize that. You don't know that, but you know what I'm saying?
Figure it out. Yeah. Like
yeah,
you're doing.
yeah. I'm like, and when you paint, like, I don't always know exactly how it's going to turn out or where I'm going to simplify something, or you know what I'm saying, make it more complex or
Me
whatever.
too.
And I appreciated her perspective and the way you captured her painting a lot.
Thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, a reader did the painting, and it was just amazing. I put it on Instagram like 1,000 years ago, but I love what she did with it. But yeah, and that, like, I feel like in the bossy world we live in, I had seen the message a lot that like, no, you're not supposed to say that like your art comes from bad things, because then you're saying that it was that you needed something bad to happen to you.
But I think a lot of artists feel that way. You know what I'm saying? Like when I am stressed out and sad, I produce my best graphic design work. Like I hate to say that, but like if I'm super sad or super stressed out, I'm like, my design work like comes so naturally, and I'm like, wow. And when things are good and in check and like I'm paying attention to those red flags, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, that's a red flag. I am not proceeding. My artwork, like it's harder to be creative for me. It's harder to get to the solution or find the problem, I guess.
Yeah. And I feel like, and it would make sense that we're kind of built that way, because it's like, well, you're like, you have to, like on an animal level, like bad things are going to happen. So that should never be said that like nothing good can come of them, because that's how you kind of keep going.
And I've been working with a career coach right now because I'm trying to get promoted, which is why I've been working crazy hours. And so, and she said like, you're always worried about like a shoe dropping. She's like, you're looking for that shoe to drop. You're afraid to be happy, to be in the moment, to be like, things are good, because she's like, you immediately think something bad's going to happen. I'm like, I don't, do I? Are you sure? And then I like stopped and think about it, and I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and I like sad songs. Like I get when I used to be young and my dad used to like pull my car around and like back it up in the driveway or whatever. He'd get in and he's like, you're listening to your wrist slitting music again, Brittany? And I'm like, I mean, it doesn't even feel sad. Like you said, you walk in a room and you don't notice the smell anymore. Like the sad music doesn't feel that sad to me. Like I need it in a way.
Yeah. Yes, no, I relate to that very much. And another big inspiration, I feel like I was at a midway point with Providence, and my friends, I get very like obsessive, and my friends were like, you have to go do something else. Like, you can't do this all day. So we went to see this band I'd never heard of that my friend was friends with the drummer's father, Hippocampus. And they played, like, I'd never heard them. And there was this one song that's mentioned in the book. And it had been so long since something like made me that like sad and alive at once. And I'm standing there with my phone, like making the video, like, this is great. And you couldn't understand the lyrics, and it wasn't released yet. And that was the best thing to happen then, because it made me so nuts. Like, it was that kind of song where I could just hear it in my head and I would get goosebumps. And like,
Yes.
about the sad, terrible, wonderful world. But I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't Google it. And that like got me into like deeper into Providence, of like ungoogleable things. Like, we're so spoiled. We're so used to be able to like getting treats for ourselves, getting what we want, finding out something. And it was like, this song, even though I knew the drummer's father by like a weird connection, I couldn't get a copy of it. I'm bad at phones, and like my video wasn't any good and was only half there. I couldn't figure out the lyrics, so I couldn't Google them. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of good. Those things are good for us. The same way pain makes you like feel alive again. And that wanting that you have is like, yeah, makes you feel. Yes.
Good. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, good.
Same, I'm like, this has been so good for me, girl.
Yeah. So what are you reading next?
We are reading The Three Mrs. Greys, and Shelley's joining us, which we're
Very-
excited about. Yeah.
Do you do it like once a month? Or
So it's usually twice a month now, because there's so many books that I want to cram in. And sometimes like 3 or 4 times I make them read a book a week, and everybody's a really good sport. There's like 20 of us, but not not all
Yeah.
20 come every time, obviously based on life and what's going on and if they're able to read the book.
yes.
But in the beginning, it was just once a month when we started. And I'm like, oh, we'll find like a book a month and it'll
No,
be
but there are
great.
so many.
And then
Yeah.
the problem is, like, we talked to an author and they're like, oh, my next book's coming out at this time. And I'm like, well, we're going to be reading that. And so like I reshuffle my list, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, so I guess we're
Yeah.
reading 4 books this month. Basically, everybody's going to get a book a week, and we'll see.
Yeah, and no way every Tuesday there are more. And it's, I don't know,
Yeah.
the impossible. And then books that I like still want, I don't know, then you remember something you were gonna read and you didn't read, and it's, I don't know. I guess it's one of my things that makes me laugh whenever anyone about any book says, oh, I'm late to the party. I'm like, no, like the books are forever. Like it's, like I know it's one way to read a book when everyone is reading it, but it can be great to read something later, or like when you forgot. Like, to me, there's nothing better than like realizing like, oh, I didn't read that one and now I get to. And yeah,
It's exciting. Yeah. What are you reading?
I've been on a John Grisham kick with Jake Brigance. We've just been in it together, but now I'm done with those. So yes, but yeah, I feel like I like to read things that are just like so not different from what I do, in that way of like, oh, the legal world. Like now I'm in that. I feel like I went to law school because I read a couple of John Grisham books, but I like that feeling of like, yeah, this perspective, like, yeah. And I feel like I would like to write about a lawyer now at some point. Yes.
I think I like that about Jodi's books. Like, I always feel like I learned something about a book, like wolves, when she goes, to the wolf pack, and the way she immersed herself basically with people that live with wolves, or the elephant sanctuary. Like, she goes, we learned about Egypt, what I'm saying, like, depending on where she takes us,
Yep.
you kind of come away, and I'm like, I feel like an expert now. I'm like, I could tell you all about the elephants.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Could I really know? But I feel like it for a minute.
I saw a little bit of the movie Ted 2, where they're making fun of them because they watch Law and Order, so they think they're lawyers. And I was like, oh, like, but it is a good.
Yeah, like for a minute, you're like, I could do it.
Yeah,
I feel really good about it.
Yes. And yeah, I want to read Fairy Tale, the new Stephen King book. I'm going to read that. I have a Sarah Vaughan book that I didn't read yet.
Is it her latest one?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we did that one last week.
We did that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was last week.
Reputation. That was,
Yeah.
they read Providence in a week. This was one of my, I crammed them into a book a week.
Summer. Yes.
Yeah. Keeping everybody busy this summer.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we did Reputation last week.
Yes. Good. Yeah, I met her in the before times, I think in 2019.
Nice. Yeah, she joined us last year. She was really lovely. It was fun. She was showing us all the book covers around the world when things get published, and how, different cultures accept different
Oh,
things.
I love it.
And
Yeah, like my Japanese U covers are like their naked bodies, like love story, like erotic, it's just, I mean, they're black and white, so I guess it's a little dark, but it just looks so different. Yeah, I love seeing what other countries do.
It's
And
neat.
again, talk about having no say, like that's another, yeah.
Is that an area you don't have any say or control in? Like it's
To me, yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of the translators, but some publishers, like the Israeli translator and I, like we'll go back and forth a million times, and I talk to him a lot. But other translations, that feeling of like you have no idea what's in there, because
yeah.
there's no one. Like I'm like, oh, that could say anything. It's a weird feeling,
I was gonna say having to let go like that has to be unique.
Yes. But I feel like that's the fun, like that's where I like the always
camera
say when
keeps
you're
going
writing
out.
a book, like the minute you're done, you start another, because that's the only thing you can control, is like that's where it has to, the minute that it becomes more about the outside stuff than the like what you're making up now, like not the road to happiness or productivity.
I understand that.
Yep. Especially I think that's what's weird, like growing up, like I didn't know what my favorite writers looked like or where they lived or anything. And it's so bizarre to me now that like everything is so there, And I even mean like in that way, a writer that I mentioned in the first book, Lucinda Rosenfeld, like just one of my favorites. And I remember writing you and thinking, yeah, I don't even know like where, like, I don't know what she looks like. I wouldn't know her on the street. I don't know anything about her. Like, because I read her books in the 90s mostly. And in the you know what I mean? When things
Yeah,
weren't.
before we had this, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that I love about book club and then having authors is like we get to ask and hear the perspective and like what your inspiration was and all of that. I'm like, so it gives us like this deeper appreciation, but then it's just so fun to interact with everybody.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Like her books, I feel like those are like they help me decide how I want to write, because she has this book. I can't think of the name of it. And I have like 5 copies of it. I have like 2 different softcover editions, 2 hardcovers, like I need them, and I'm, all around me. What She Saw, where she's just going through all these different men from 4th grade onward. And it's just so in your face, direct, like, and I just love the feeling, that energy in her books. And I remember writing you, and when they said it was a thriller, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that, because I'm just copying, I'm just copying that, like finding my own way of doing that, like throwing things in your face. Because I like the feeling when an author does that to me.
I like that too. I haven't read her books, but now you've got me curious.
Yeah, yes. And she
We're
is out
always-
there, she is around, so maybe you could do a book club with her too.
I was going to say, if we do, we'll have to bring you so you can finally meet her if you haven't met her.
Yes. She's a great book. Another one of hers is I'm So Happy for You, that I'm like, it's such a good title, because it's, yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I'll have to remember those two and we'll look them up.
Yes. Yes.
We're always looking for something else. So
Yes. Yeah. And then there's another book, A Good Man, that I wish more people would read. One of those, I sat there, you read it in a day. So it's good for you guys. That way you could make them read 2 books in a week.
see, love you.
Mean and Mean, and Ani Katz, she's around too. And it's just, to me, like, what a powerful punch of a book. Like,
Okay.
yes. And I think it's like 200 something pages, but it also reads really, it's just
I was
beautiful.
going to say at that point, yeah, that's a quick read for us, basically, based on what I
Yeah.
make them keep up with and do.
Yeah. I think of some of those books as like sunburn books, because it was like, I'm sitting there knowing I'm burning. I'm like, but I'm not, there's no way. Like
I did
can't-
that with the first U book. So I took the U to the beach many, many years ago, basically. And I sat all day and I'm like, I'm not leaving this beach until I'm done because I need to know. My mom's like, do you want anything? Do you want to go eat? And I'm like, no,
Nope.
we're leaving. The sun is setting. I don't care. I'm like, I will
Yep.
be out here with the flashlight. I am finishing this book.
Yep. A good feeling.
And she's like, this must be a good book. I'm like, and she doesn't do anything dark and scary. I'm like, it's not for you. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Not her kind of book, but I love it.
Yes.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for being with us.
so much. Yeah. All of you and Felix too.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, you know.
Yes.
Had to come say hi.
Yeah. And I'll send you the names of the other books that I mentioned so you can.
Please do.
Excellent.
Yes.
And then
yeah.
that research, that whole
When you pour out the
photosynthesis
title and
thing.
art- Yeah. Sorry.
I said that whole photosynthesis thing too sounds fascinating.
Oh yeah. Let me dig up. I must have.
I was gonna
links.
say, if you can
They're
dig
still
that up,
there.
I was like, just out of like sheer curiosity.
Yes. Yes. And I might even have that part of the book, where, I don't know. Yes.
That'd be cool.
That'd be really neat.
Mhm. Good.
And then
Well,
those arcs would be
Yes,
we would
I'm like,
absolutely
when
love
it has
to.
a title, first it will have a title and then it will have arcs and then I'll get them to you. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
This was awesome. Thank you so much. You're so fun.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, yeah, I was so looking forward to this. Yeah.
I was too.
Good.
Any other
Well-
questions?
Looking. You've been called a storytelling sorcerer by the New York Times. Do you lean into this title?
I mean, I remember my mom did like that shit was laminated on the fridge, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, it's a nice play of words. Like yeah, I don't like have a hat. I don't think, yeah. No, I don't like my mom, I feel like that's what moms are there for, right? Like she, reads it and like I'm thrilled to get reviewed anywhere and anytime, but yeah,
I just saw that and I was like, what a description for somebody. Love it.
I mean, it's fun. I like it. Yeah. Yes.
I feel
But
like that is hat worthy. If you were going to embroider something on a hat, I feel like
Yeah,
you
I
could
feel
go
like
with
the
that.
New York Times, if they're going to call you that, they should give you a hat.
Yes. But there's nothing like writing another book to make you think that I am not that. Like that's why you keep writing.
They said it. It can't
I
take it
know.
now.
No take backs.
It's on the
out
internet now.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope they don't take that back. Yeah.
That's
Because I guess
forever.
the way my brain works, I just see the review of you before, like, well, turns out she's not a sorcerer. You know what I mean? The way you were saying, like my brain works that way too.
Yeah, I was gonna say is you wait for that shoe to drop, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, instead of just being happy and being like, I did it, yay. It's like, okay, I did it, yay. Now what?
Yeah.
What's next?
Remember the Oscars moment when they gave up their trophy to the wrong people?
Yes.
There it is. Like, knew it was possible. Like,
Yep. That's what I'm watching for those and I'm like, well, might make sense. That's my life.
yes. Oh, well, thank you guys so much. This was fun and I can't wait to do it again.
It's
Yeah.
awesome. We're excited to have you back.
Mhm.
Yes. And have a good rest of your Sundays.
You too, have a
too.
Too.
Thank you.
Thanks
Yeah.
for
I was
taking a break with us. I know you've been
Yeah.
writing, so thank you
So
for
happy.
making time.
Yeah, nice to talk about it instead of, yes. And
then
remember
you're-
that it's worked out. I've finished the books and yeah.
It's great. And we're gonna read them and we're super excited. So
Yes, and I don't know if you do anthologies, but that Human Monsters is out in October with a lot of like known writers and new writers and all little stories about human monsters.
nice.
That's another one too. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll write it down.
I'll see you soon.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.